Most agency owners think that their problems are unique. But after working one-to-one now with over 40 agencies, I can categorically say that the same problems keep coming up across the same 5 key areas in agencies. The difference between the agencies that kick on and grow the way the owner wants them to isn't the owner doing more work. It isn't about hiring 20 people. It isn't about bringing in another new tool. It's about solving the problems in these 5 key areas and doing so in a systematic way. I'm Ross. I was MD of a 7-figure agency by 30, and I oversaw a team of 40 people and over 150 clients. And after doing that, I now spend my time helping other agency owners build the business that they want. So today I'm going to take you through what I typically audit and what I look for when I first start working with a new client. And I'll explain that in the context of why these things are important to helping people get unstuck and stop spinning their wheels as they attempt to grow their agency. When a new client comes to me, it's usually the case that they feel like they know what the problem is. So I'll hear things like, I just need more leads, or my pricing isn't right, or I need to hire someone to help me do this thing faster or better. But after working with over 40 agencies now, it's rarely the case that the owner knows exactly what the problem is. What is the root cause of the issues they're seeing? The challenge, of course, is that you can't really fix what you can't see clearly. So the very first thing I do is help people get clarity on what the problems are and where the real opportunities lie in their business. So before I touch anything or give anyone advice on what they should do or shouldn't do, we do an audit. This is not a theoretical or a hypothetical situation where we talk through things and think about what could be better. We follow a framework that I've built out over the last 2.5 years as I worked with agencies. I have a series of questions that I follow that help me understand what's going well, what isn't, and understand how the agency is actually functioning. This audit framework has helped agencies go from, frankly, operational chaos to building a systematic, scalable business that runs without them. The audit always starts in the same way too. It's about being brutally honest about where you are today, how you got here, and what you really want from this business. Not what you think you might want or not what you think you should be doing, what we really need to have happen here to turn things around. All right, so let's get into this 5-pillar framework that I use to audit agencies and then actually use to help them month to month as I begin working with them. So we're going to begin with the arguably most important one of all, which is the owner themselves. One of the most common things I'll say when I first start working with an agency is that we can worry about everything else after we get the owner sorted. So there are a whole host of things that owners think they should be working on or think they should be doing, but often they forget the piece that I recommend they start with, which is themselves. The key question here is really, what role does the owner need to play going forward to help them build the agency or the business that they want for themselves? The role that the owner has played up until now is generally one that's quite holistic. They have been helping people do this, they've been involved in that, they've generally had oversight over everything, and fundamentally they've been a key person in how fast or how well their business has grown. For obvious reasons. They own it, they set it up. But now they've got stuck, or they've stagnated, or they've struggled to see the outcomes they expected. And almost always it's because they are operating in the way that they used to, not the way that the agency now needs them to. So the first question to ask is, what role are you currently playing in your agency? And the second question is, based on where you want to take your business, what role does the agency need you to play going forward? Very specific language, because the question is, what does the agency need from you? Not necessarily what people need from you, or not necessarily what you want to do, but what do you really add to the agency in terms of skills or strengths? In this sense, you're almost thinking in terms of yourself as another piece to the puzzle. You are just another person, albeit a very important one, that can do certain things really well. The key element to understanding even what you're currently doing is understanding where your time goes. So one of the first things I want to do with anyone is pretty much say, write down what you do in a week or in a month. That alone as an exercise can be quite revealing, because we'll find out where the owner is really spending their time. For example, I'd hedge my bets and say that most agency owners that I work with still do some element of delivery. That could vary from 5% of their week up to 50 or 60, depending on the size of the agency. Now that is, in many cases, more of a problem than anything else. So by highlighting that and speaking about the facts, or actually being very realistic about how much time went into it, the owner themselves is now faced with the reality. They know exactly what's happening and they can do something about it. Of course, when you know where your time is going and when you know what your role currently is and you understand what you need to do, the question then becomes, well, what specifically am I going to do as part of the day-to-day functioning of this business, and what am I going to do to grow the business? So for example, a typical owner might move into more of a stereotypical management role. They might be an overseer of a team, it could be a leadership team. They might have a couple of key points of contact within the business that in their own right oversee pods or teams. And beyond that, then they're going to want to have marketing and sales activity happening that in more cases than not, they will still own. Because who is the key person responsible for the growth of the agency? It probably will be the owner until it gets to a stage where they can think about hiring someone to help them do that too. This really comes back to two key things for the owner: direction and clarity. They need to know where they want to go and why, basically. And once the owner has figured that out for themselves, they can then decide what role they're going to play in the business going forward. That is such a key move for most owners because it's a huge, huge change in most cases. They're going from saying I can do everything and should do more to I'm going to do these certain things and I'm going to do less of what I was doing before. The second pillar is clients. Now, at this point, we move into things in a non-specific order. I'm not saying that clients is always the second priority, but generally speaking, thinking about the type of clients is a really important thing for most agencies. What does that mean? So when I think about clients, the first thing we want to consider is how healthy are the existing clients? How healthy is your portfolio? So portfolio is simply a term I use to describe the collective number of clients that an agency has. The health of that portfolio is going to come down to a few key things. The way I like to do this is simply plot the existing clients on a chart or in a table and grade them based on key criteria that we consider fundamental to the value of that client within the agency. So for example, this is not just about revenue. Existing revenue is important, but there are things beyond existing revenue that will help you understand how valuable a client is long term. For example, if you were generating a large amount of revenue from one client, you might look at that and think they're the most important client for me. Well, what if I told you that you were over delivering, so your profitability on that account was low? What if I told you that you had sunk all your key resources into that account, but the relationship wasn't established? What if I told you that that client had indicated that they didn't really have any scope to grow or had no interest in spending more in this channel? You're already doing as much as they can afford. What if I told you that you've just started working with this client this year? There are quite a few factors beyond existing revenue that will help you determine how valuable a client is. The key ones for me, just to be clear, will fall into one of two categories: performance or relationship. And then beyond that, we have things like potential growth, we have tenure, we have profitability, actual hourly. There are things you can add in that you consider important to giving you a really clear picture about which clients are doing well for you and which clients are more of a burden. This then helps owners make decisions about clients faster. So gathering this information together is usually an important part of any audit, but it's something the owner can then do month to month off the back of that. The key theme here with both the owner as the first pillar and the clients as the second pillar is that in both cases, it's enabling people to make decisions. The third pillar then is people. People, along with clients, are fundamentally two of the core elements of any agency. If we don't have the right clients, we're probably not going to do too well. If we don't have the right people in the business, we're probably going to struggle. So when it comes to people, who do you have? How well are they doing? Do you know who's struggling? In the same way we think about clients, we're going to want to apply the same thought process to our team and help us understand what's going on in terms of performance and who is on our side and who is maybe not such a good fit for the business. Of course, a really important element to this as well is not just from the owner's perspective, but it's from the team's perspective. Do they understand exactly what is expected of them? Do they feel incentivized and motivated to do what they need to a very high standard day in, day out? Are they enjoying their work? Do they see value in what they're doing for clients and for the agency? Does it feel like it's challenging them? Do they feel like they're growing or learning every week or every month within the business? Do they feel appropriately compensated for what they're doing. There are a huge number of reasons why someone might be very happy or very dissatisfied within a role, but it's your job as the owner to figure out a framework, and through an audit we establish that allows you to have clarity for both yourself and your employees in terms of how they're doing, where it's going well and where it maybe isn't going so well. One last really important consideration with people is helping them understand where their own time is going. So in a similar way with the owner, we said, what is the owner doing and what should they be doing? We want to look at the rest of the team through the same lens. So time tracking is something that can be quite frustrating, or is perceived as being this task that the team wish they didn't have to do, but it's actually more about helping them understand where their time is going. So we can then look at that and say, okay, you're over delivering here. Why is that? Or you've got more capacity here to do these things, or you actually have more time than you think to do something that you've been wanting to do with this client for a while. There's a huge number of, I suppose, consequences or things we can consider off the back of understanding what is actually happening with an employee's time. The fourth pillar then is pipeline. Now, this is typically one that is brought up in most of the sales conversations or intro conversations I have with agency owners. I don't consider pipeline as an issue in its own right. There is generally something deeper within it. So if someone says to me, I need more leads, this is where the audit really comes into its own, because it will help us establish exactly what is causing them to say that as the problem. The first question here is usually, do you know who your ideal client is? Do you have complete clarity for yourself in terms of who you should be working with and who you definitely shouldn't? Because if you don't have that, that's where we're going to start. On top of that then, it is being super clear and honest with yourself about what you're going to do for these ideal clients once you get them. Because in a similar sense, if you don't understand exactly your own service and what it is and why it helps your ideal clients, then you're probably going to have a hard time actually selling or converting those people. A really simple question here is, do you have a pipeline? Because a lot of people actually don't even use a CRM or have even a spreadsheet in place that allows them to track existing sales conversations. So if you don't have a pipeline, it's probably a good time to set one up. But if you do have one, is it up to date? How is it used currently? There's a decent amount of opportunity in that area alone to make an owner's life easier in terms of understanding what leads are still active, what have gone cold, what to do with certain leads at certain points, etc. The big question then is, once you know who you should be working with or who you want to work with and what you're going to do for them, and you've got a pipeline set up, it's how do we put people into this? How do we generate leads? And that's the exciting question, to be honest. This is almost like the fun thing to consider. Like, this is the bit that owners really want to do more of, but quite often take quite a scattered approach. So they'll dabble across 8 or 9 different marketing and sales channels, but they won't really properly focus on 1 or 2 where their target audience spends a lot of time. Do you know how many leads you want or need to generate a month to help you hit your sales or growth targets? And once you know that number, what are you going to do to generate those leads? And I would generally recommend through an audit process that we identify a key sales marketing channel. It could be LinkedIn, it could be events, it could be something else. But we're trying to really focus in on 1 or 2 key activities that an agency can do to generate the leads that they want. One thing here that often goes under the radar is the importance of putting a system or a process around referrals. Referrals are often seen as this thing that you can't rely on to grow a business, or that you shouldn't rely on to grow your agency. Referrals in isolation without a system is just a hope. It's just a wish or a prayer almost that you get leads. But by putting a system or a strategy around referrals, you're taking away the hope or the expectation that something comes in. You're putting intentionality in place around a different channel. So in the same sense that you might use LinkedIn to acquire customers, you might say, I have a referral strategy in place. And I'll be honest, I'd much rather have warm leads through referrals than cold leads through any marketing channel. So the 5th pillar is processes and systems. Now, you might be thinking, why is that so low down the list? Surely it's more important, and surely someone that runs a business called FlexOps will consider operations more important. Generally speaking, most agency owners I spend time with have a whole host of things they can do before thinking about what tool or system or software to use to run the business. As I just went through in this video, there are things like figuring out who the right client is and figuring out your pricing or your people, your team structure or your time, and understanding really the core components of the agency. The system you put in place is more about how it runs once you've established all those things. The main pitfall here that will come up through an audit process is establishing that a lot of owners overcomplicate this. They think they need 100 processes and systems, when in reality they need a handful done exceptionally well. You will get a remarkable amount done in an agency by following a good, clear system for client delivery, onboarding, and internal communication. Now, those are 3 systems that I have spoken about in a previous video, and I would always consider those as 3 of the top things to think about whenever you start building out a system for how your agency runs without the owner being required across all these key areas. When it comes to digging into the process and system side of things, I don't really expect many owners of a small agency to have been documenting things, but if you have been documenting things, the question will always be, how accessible are they by the team? Because if the team can't get access to the knowledge you've shared, they won't use it, and that's as bad as not having it at all. Lastly, in relation to an audit here, we will usually do a version of a process mapping exercise, but process mapping in its own right is probably a video or a topic because it is quite in-depth, and whenever we do it, we want to do it once and do it really well to establish a benchmark for how things currently happen. But the question will broadly be, what currently occurs? How do we currently serve clients? And generally speaking, what goes on in the business? And if you can map that out, it gives you a very good starting point for the process and system building side of things. Now, after going through an audit process with myself, the main thing I hear from an owner is simply that they realize they've been spending too much time on the wrong things. They've taken the attitude that they need to spend more time across all areas of their business to get it moving in the right direction. And of course, the purpose of the audit is to highlight maybe 2 or 3 key areas where they really need to focus in on and address immediately. So the owner goes from feeling stuck and unsure about where to start to having complete clarity in terms of what they should do next and the things they actually need to focus on. So at this stage, you really have 2 options. Option 1, you can click the link in the description and actually download a self-audit tool that you can use to pretty much go through in detail what I just illustrated or discussed today. Option 2 is actually have me do it with you. And that is usually the first step for me when I work with anyone anyhow. But in either case, doing an audit, whether it's with or without my support, will help you get clarity on exactly what is broken, what's working well, and where you need to spend your time in the next 30 to 90 days. That will get you on the right track to building the agency that you want, as opposed to just spinning your wheels and really hoping something changes if you do more work.